Hello everyone, welcome to another Tuesday evening patron-only stream for the Eventide campaign. How is everyone doing this fine Tuesday evening? I am Jason Bowman. I'm the director of game design and Paizo, creator of Pathfinder, and the author of this world. And today, what I'd like to do is chat with all of you a little bit about a couple things. First is kind of just the wrap-up of the first part. Honestly, it's mostly done from my perspective. So I want to talk a little bit about both groups as they wrapped up all the content and made their way kind of out of the first bit of the adventure. And then I want to kind of look back at how, they went off the rails here and there. And what that means for my storytelling, and what that means for the adventure itself. Because, now that I can look at it in its totality, I can realize there's some spots that I need to tweak and whatnot. So the version that everyone has right now has always been a playtest version, and I'm going to probably tweak it in a few ways for the final just to make it a better experience, make it a better adventure, right? That's kind of the point of playtesting. So I want to talk about how they went off the rails, and I think that's going to be most of our chat here today. I want to talk a little bit about what's coming up for my playtest groups and what will probably sit between Adventures 1 and 2, which is some time in town. I think that's not going to be a full adventure. I think it's mostly going to be them doing some shopping, them doing some, time spent selling some stuff, picking out some stuff, and frankly, then them moving back into the adventure. And last but not least, for those who stick around all the way to the end, I've got something exciting for all of you. I have your first look at some of the finished art, which I just got in here a few days ago, and I want to share it with all of you. There's some really fun stuff in there. I've only got 3 pieces so far, and I've been playing around with them and getting them ready to show off. These are pieces for the player's guide, and I'm excited to show them off. I also just made contact and got a verbal agreement from a second artist, because it's always good to have multiple artists in your stable. So fun stuff. And we're going to take a look at all that here today. So let's get started. So wrapping up part 1, both groups have now completed their playthrough. So both groups have had 3 sessions, and in 3 sessions, both groups finished up all of the encounters in, session 1, part 1 of Wolfrun's Fate. So they've explored the entire first floor of the tower, and more importantly, they've both gotten the key. Both of them figured out what they needed to do. It wasn't really a surprise, although both groups did need some nudging to get them to complete it. They kind of did a bunch of things, but they didn't really expect anything out of it, and they were 1 or 2 things short, 1 or 2 chores short of completely cleaning up the place. So they needed a little bit of nudging from the major domo to get them to finish it up. And that's to be expected, right? I don't think every group is going to figure it out, and they're certainly not going to realize that there's a reward for doing it. Although I will say this, when both groups, when they realized there was some sort of prize or some sort of secret, the excitement at the table was palpable. So that worked out well. These last 2 sessions had both groups facing kind of weakened combats and weakened haunts, because the other groups had already been through them. That is, in both cases, because of their routes through it, the Thunder Company went the opposite way from each group in their individual playthrough. So the Thunder Company had been in the rooms that the players had been in. So for the first group, that was facing the kitchen encounter against the oven, and then followed up with the haunt of the food fight. For them, right, the oven was wounded. It made that fight quite a bit easier, although not quite as easy as the other group that got a crit on the first round. They had an easy time of it. But it was easier than it probably would have otherwise been. It still dealt some pretty serious damage, but they were able to take it down. And they actually completely destroyed it. Because before it got back to its turn, they just kept hammering on the thing, and they wiped it out. So for that group, for the Thursday group, their oven is totally destroyed. The Monday group is going to have their oven come back at some point in time, but right now it's out of commission. And then the Thursday group finished the oven, went and dealt with the food fight, and didn't really have too hard of a time with it. They didn't eat the food. They instead cleaned up everything and took care of it. So that basically counted. So that was them. That first group, the Thursday group, then left the tower and had to report their findings to Havanok. And they mostly did that. They kept the existence of the key and the second floor a secret, and I'll get into that in a bit because it's an interesting pattern that I'm probably going to make some adjustments to the final four based on their playthroughs. So then I had the Monday group, which played like just last night, and for them they had the book fight, the haunted books, and then the centipedes. The centipedes, just like for the other group, was a total mop-up fight. They had no problems with it at all. There was even one less centipede for them. And the book fight was the book haunt was actually the big challenge, right? Those haunts are tricky. And they're both complex haunts. They're both challenges. They're not meant to be super hard, but because they open up with something that can damage the entire party. And in yesterday's group, I had 2 characters critically fail their saving throws against the whirlwind of paper cuts. So they were bleeding and almost dead, and they just barely managed to pull it out. Now, what's really interesting between the 2 groups is they have next to no healing in both groups. So the Monday night group has a cleric, but the cleric does not have a high charisma and does not have a bunch of free heal spells. They have 1. And does not have a high wisdom. They're a war priest and are designed more for fighting. So, like, the other group has an alchemist. Both groups have both groups have a bard? No, only one group has a bard. The Monday group has a bard. So here's the thing. They've got penumbras and bards and alchemists and a war priest cleric, but they don't have a giant pile of healing floating around. So this whole thing has been a real resource drain for them. They really kind of, by the end, both groups were relying very heavily on medicine checks. And, they managed to get by, right? Nobody died. I think I only had 1 or 2 characters even get knocked unconscious throughout the whole thing. But it was close. Honestly, the book haunt could have led to character death, but they managed to pull it out. That's when the war priest pulled out their 1 heal spell and healed the whole party and took care of the bleeding and got rid of a lot of the damage that everybody had taken. So that kind of saved their bacon. Great role-playing all around. It was a lot of fun. But the second group, the group last night, when they were finished and got the key, they didn't want to leave at all. They didn't want to go out. They didn't want to report it. They wanted to literally go straight into the second floor. And the major domo's like, listen, you're clearly very tired. You've been at this for hours and hours. Perhaps you should rest. And they were like, oh yeah, resting's a good idea. Well, we're not going back out though, because if we go back out, they won't let us back in. And this is when I suddenly realized that there was a bit of a story flaw in here that plays counter to character motivation. Right? This is something secret. This is something special, and it's theirs. And as a result, both groups got very protective of it. So that's going to lead me down some roads that I want to talk about here in a bit, about kind of how things went off the rails and what I did about it on the fly to fix it, and where that's going to lead us for the final version of this. So, like, this is frankly some of the most in-depth work I've ever done on an adventure, because I really want it to be perfect. And, having 2 playtest groups run through a thing and having all the analysis I do here is really a lot more than I normally do for an adventure. I try and playtest all of my adventures before I turn them over. Sometimes I don't actually manage to playtest the whole thing, but I get through most of it, and that guides me through most of it. So, but in this case, I really am committed to making sure that my players get a chance to kind of experience vast amounts of this before I release it to the public. So, yeah, that I think, so from there, let's talk a bit about how it went off the rails. So both the groups, have finished up their parts. They're both roughly at the same part. The Thursday group is a little ahead. They already did their debrief with Havanok. The Monday group tried to sleep in the tower and or in the dungeon, and the session ended with the door being slammed open and Havanok and the Blue Banners being like, "What the hell are you doing?" As they finally came inside to find out what happened to them, because the other groups had already left. So they wanted to make sure they weren't dead. So, looking back, the story mostly proceeded as written. There were a number of places where things kind of took a turn or happened slightly differently. Most of those are pretty minor, but some are worth noting. So, looting was one thing where both groups were kind of different, and in some cases were counter to my expectations. So both groups missed some things that they had an opportunity to find. One group missed the ring underneath the table in the dining room. They just didn't look under the table. They said, I was like, well, where do you look? And nobody said that they investigate the floor under the table. I actually did have one character that was like, well, I took a look around, and they just blew the perception check. The other group missed the dragon scale in the fireplace. They didn't sift through the ashes or anything. I mean, both of these are reasonable misses. But both groups also were interested in things that I wasn't necessarily expecting them to be interested in. So, most of the times this was little things like, oh, is that rug on the map valuable? And I was like, well, no, it's soiled and things like that. Excuse me. Both groups were fascinated with bits of the treasure that they couldn't necessarily take with them. The statues in particular, some of the tapestries and stuff like that. There's the tapestry in the dining room that you can take, but is very heavy and awkward. So they rolled that up and hid it so that none of the other groups would find it and take it. So it's just kind of it's interesting watching their kind of competing and differing strategies to looting. I don't think that makes any changes to my adventure script, although I do want to, now that they're done, analyze how much loot each group got. I know the first group got about 50 gold worth of loot that was bought by the city, and then a few odds and ends they got to keep for themselves. So all told, they will have gotten probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 gold worth of items. But that group missed out on the silver dagger, which was by far one of the most valuable objects in there because it's a level 2 permanent item. So they missed out on that, whereas the other group got it because they went that way first. Now this does tell me that I might want to make a slight alteration to the dungeon that, over in the centipede room, there is something else that is perhaps more valuable that the Thunder Company finds if the players don't go there first. So I may make some adjustments like that. But other than that, I don't think I'll mess with the loot formula too much. Both groups are going to get about 450 XP, and, as a result, they're going to be about halfway to second level, so they don't need to have all the loot yet, but I do need to kind of keep track of it and make sure that they're getting enough so that they can be well-rounded for second level. So the biggest thing that their looting misses allowed me to do was to add kind of some interesting flavor, and this may be something that I codify into the adventure, for the other two adventuring groups. So in both cases, the rare thing that the group missed was found by Grablin's Lot, and it's the one good thing they found in the day. So they're super excited about it. So in one playthrough, in the Thursday playthrough, they found the ring. They don't know what it does. It's a one-use talisman. It's not that powerful. But for them, it's a big damn deal because it's a magic ring. And then for the other group, the Monday night group, Grablin's Lot and that group found the dragon scale. So, and I added this as kind of a coda to the end where those groups were leaving as the players were finishing up tasks for the ghost, for the Major Domo. And they saw Grablin's Lot, like, holding this thing and talking excitedly about each other. And in both cases, both groups were like, can we take that? Like, both groups immediately kind of swapped over to murder hobo mode, and we're like, maybe we should murder them and take that. And I was like, well, listen, you signed an agreement there. You agreed not to harm any of the other folks. And, my good buddy Dan is in one of these groups, and he always plays a rogue. And he was like, I just want to sneak up and steal the dragon scale. And I'm like, they're holding it between them. You can't go up and take it. They are looking right at it. I had to convince him. It was fun. We had a good time. So, yeah. It's a good time. So, that led to this kind of interesting, combination, that led to how the players are viewing the other groups, right? Both groups kind of are intimidated by the Thunder Company, which is by design, because they look like tough, hardened mercenaries, and both groups kind of looked at Grablin's Lot like cannon fodder, or kind of inexperienced noobs that could possibly be exploited. Like, no one quite got to it. One the alchemist con artist in the Thursday group talked Grablin's Lot into exchanging a simple healing elixir for a pint of oil that they claimed was, super goblin brain force or something. I don't remember. But it's ridiculous, and they conned them into that. So that was one group. One group, the Thursday group, conned them into trading away a healing elixir that, the group's cleric had, because the cleric doesn't have any spells. And the other group contemplated murdering them for a dragon scale. So both groups kind of view Grablin's Lot as a bunch of suckers, and both groups are kind of afraid of the Thunder Company. So I think that is kind of an interesting thing. I may add some notes to the adventure talking about the posturing of these two groups and how that will play out in the future, because both groups, I think, are going to be appearing again and again throughout this adventure, right? And be kind of foils for the characters. In fact, I believe in part 3, the Thunder Company directly acts against them. And I may do something where in part 4, Grablin's Lot helps them. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out. But I want to play kind of 2 type and against type with these two groups. So we'll see how it goes. That's kind of back brain writing for the future. I haven't obviously said any of this. So, and then that gets us to the kind of off the rails nature of the end of both playthroughs. In that both groups wanted to keep the existence of the second floor, or this passageway that leads to another floor, to themselves. Both groups wanted to go and explore it immediately, even though, they're exhausted and out of resources. One group lied. Oh, boy, I'm tired today. Lied to Havanok to keep the existence of the second floor a secret, and then were making up stories as to why they would need to go back in the next day, but they were mostly accepting that they were going to go home and rest, and whatever that is. And then the other group tried to sleep in the dungeon. So, both of these groups clearly view that as a great potential for wealth, because it is, or fame or XP or who knows, right? But its existence is theirs, right? And it's clear that both groups view it that way. And that's a good motivator from a story perspective. I like that I'm not going to change that. But what I will probably do is alter the setup a bit to make the adventure a little bit cleaner. And here's why. So the last thing I want the players to do is go straight to the second floor. Because after the first floor, they will have fought so many encounters. I mean, at that point in time, they've fought 6 encounters, either, 2 haunts and 4 combats. Now, the combats are all moderate or low, right? So they're not hard, but there was 4 of them, and that's a lot. So, you know, and add on 2 haunts, and there just isn't enough resources to go and start exploring the second floor. It's just not advisable. So the players need to back out and rest. And I can't have them resting in the dungeon because part of why I want them to go back out into the town and rest is so that they can sell some of their loot and buy some supplies so that when they approach the second half of this, they at least have some benefit from doing the first half. So I want them to have, you know, maybe some purchased healing elixirs or poultices. Maybe they can, you know, pick up a few, you know, trinkets or things like that. I don't think they can buy magic items, but they could buy, you know, kind of, mainly because there aren't very many for sale in Wormbone period. But they could at least spend their money on some alchemical remedies and tools to help them with the next part of this dungeon. So, you know, I want to encourage them to do that, and I've got a way to do it. Part of this is just altering the start of the adventure. So when the players agree to enter this dungeon, one thing that they're doing is they're agreeing to a set of terms, and those terms are like, don't fight the other characters. The dungeon is hard enough. You have to tell us everything you've seen, and you have to let us buy the things of historical significance. I'm going to add a clause that says, and you have to be out by nightfall. We want to be able to seal it up and keep it safe overnight. If you're not back by nightfall, we will send in guards to try and find you. This just puts a timer on it. It gives them enough time to explore the whole place. If they have 8 hours, they're not going to run out of time. Exploring all the rooms takes 7 hours max, and that's assuming an hour per room, which is kind of what I did. That is something I'm going to add to the description, is that this isn't about strict timekeeping, but assume that they spend about an hour in each room as they look at stuff. If they want to go faster, they can, but, you know, assume that that's about how long it takes. So that should help solve that problem, that they will then view it differently. Because in this case, both groups tried to use weasel kind of logic on the rules. And we're like, well, you didn't say we had to come out right away. Like, well, there's a whole town full of folks out there waiting for you to come out. The other two groups have come out, and if you don't, it looks weird. So, you know, that's I think the right way to solve it. Just to add an extra restriction that's like, yeah, and be out by nightfall. Do not stay in there overnight. We cannot guarantee your safety, and we will attempt to get you out if night falls and you are still inside. So I think that's probably the right call. I think that solves up this problem and then turns it into a different kind of problem. So that doesn't actually solve it. It just changes it and channels it in a way that I can control it from a narrative sense better, right? Because the first group left, but they then wanted to keep it a secret. So when they were talking, I had Havanok be like, listen, if there's something in there that still needs to be explored, you've certainly proven yourself more than capable, right? You know, we will let you explore it. But even with that, they didn't want to say. So, you know, I think what needs to happen is just some tips and guidance about how Havanok works with the party. And if the party does express that they want to go back inside and just go over the place with a fine-tooth comb, that the guards will let them do that. The other groups are not interested in that. So basically it's just giving them an allowance that if they want to go in there secret and pretend like it's this clandestine thing, Havanok is smart enough to realize that, you know, as a lieutenant in the Blue Banners is a slightly higher level character and probably sees through their nonsense, but is willing to let them have it as long as it doesn't prove dangerous. So I think that probably solves up that particular problem, at least, you know, gets it so that it's in a position where I can manage it and control. Interestingly enough, both groups also talked about trying to hide various things that they found. And I had to remind them that they were going to be searched. So most of them were like, oh, all right. And it's not really a big deal. It's not like they take the magic items or anything. They just take like, oh, that cool tapestry. Well, you were going to sell it anyway. You weren't going to keep it. So, you know, all told, you know, it was a pretty straightforward accounting for the first group. I haven't done it for the second group yet because they didn't quite get to that point because they hemmed and hawed about how to stay in the dungeon for 10 minutes running out the clock on our session. So that was kind of where we were at. I think in other ways they went off the rails was mostly just kind of standard adventurer nonsense, right? You know, characters doing zany things, you know, trying different kind of wacky solutions to the haunts, trying to do acrobatic stunts throughout the fights and combats, constantly kind of looking for an edge or an advantage, getting cover from a thing or that sort of stuff. I generally am pretty flexible in allowing my player characters to do that sort of stuff. It's their story. And, but I don't think that mandates any changes to the adventure. There is probably a note I want to add to the book haunt about, destroying the pile of books is an option. Because that is the direction both groups ended up going. Yesterday's group was really close to realizing that they could maybe convince the Major Domo to stop this, but they gave up before they made the check. So they were like, oh, well, you know, is there something special about these books? And I'm like, well, they all look like a bunch of arcane tomes about pretty interesting topics. And they're like, oh, okay, well, anyway. And I was just like, oh, you were almost right there of saying, well, could I convince the Major Domo that maybe he shouldn't be destroying these rare, valuable tomes? And they just didn't quite go for it. So, you know, that happens. That is kind of the way these things go. You know, missed opportunities and stuff are part of an adventure. And, you know, as a GM, I just kind of have to go, all right, so let's move on. I always find that funny whenever I'm trying to point out a thing and the players just ignore it and move on. And I'm like, all right, right? You know, I always find it funny when groups miss a thing. Because they just weren't paying attention, right? Or they skipped something that they should have caught, but didn't. So, I mean, this, as far as an adventure goes, it's not a railroad because, you know, it's not a linear dungeon. But it's certainly within guideposts. So the player characters couldn't go too terribly off the road and go do something else entirely, or leave town, or talk to the wrong people, or get in fights, or anything like that. So, you know, as far as an intro adventure, you know, this one was frankly, pretty tame, right? In terms of how much the players could interfere with the story or disrupt it. So they mostly stuck with what was presented to them. I think there was a few places where they wished they could, oh, can I do this? Can I do that? And I'm like, well, no, not really. But, you know, most of the time it was pretty straightforward. So, you know, I think player shenanigans, if I had to give it a score, you know, maybe a 3. The Thursday group, maybe a 4, just because of the goblin trying to sell people scams all the time. The Monday group is probably more like a 3, in terms of, you know, a 1 to 10 scale. So, you know, they're not too out there. They didn't try anything too outrageous. At one point in time, one of the groups was like, maybe we just light the whole dungeon on fire. And I'm like, what are you talking about? All right, no, we're not doing it, right? Like, this place is filled with historical relics and things of value. You know, oh, that's right. The Monday night group did find the pixie skeleton. But they have no idea what it is. They're just like, this thing's weird. It looks like someone glued butterfly wings to this tiny little human skeleton. So, yeah, so, I just got a question from Chad of how the goblin con artist reacted to the news that the halfling was dead, that Grayson Nimblebrow was dead. Yeah, so if you recall, at the start of the adventure, right, they meet an extra character who's going to go on this adventure with them, Grayfon Nimblebrow. But Grayfon doesn't show up the next morning because Grayfon is dead. He's been killed. And when, at the end of the previous session for the Thursday group, I dropped that bombshell right at the end. And then asked if they had seen this dagger and showed them a dagger. And they were like, this is what we found plunged into his heart. And at that point in time, the gun was like, ooh, because they assumed that they had killed him, that they had poisoned him with lamp oil. The other group doesn't know that Grayfon is dead yet. Because their cliffhanger was basically being yelled at for still being in the dungeon. So, yeah. That's kind of where both groups ended. Now, where do we go from here? From here, I think both groups are going to have some town time. Probably 1 to 2 hours of our next session will be time in town. I'm going to figure out where they're staying, whether or not they're sticking together as a group yet. They're probably not. Some of them are locals and will have houses that they can go to. Others may be staying in inns and stuff. So I'll be asking them that, and then of course they'll be selling some stuff and maybe going to some shops and buying a handful of things. I think that alone will give them a light sense of the town. We'll talk about some of the places they can go and shops they can visit. And some things they can buy. Now, one thing that I am working on for the GM's library is kind of more detailed information about these shops and what they actually carry, and what you can find at them. So I'll be able to use that information to guide my players for the next sessions. The next sessions aren't until next Thursday and then the following Monday. So I've got over a week to kind of sort out some of this stuff. And, of course, build parts of the second part of the adventure. I probably don't need to build a lot of it, but I need to build at least a pretty good chunk of it. And when I say build, I mean not just write, but I also have to build it in Roll20 and all that. So, there's a lot of work to be done between now and next Thursday. But, that's what I got weeknights and weekends for. So I think that's probably going to be what the next sessions are, figuring out lodging, doing some shopping. I may include some intrigue with the Grayfon, but I don't want to solve it yet. Who killed the Grayfon Nimblebrow? We'll find out. I know who it is, but I'm not going to say just yet. It is not who you expect. It's not like a member of the Thunder Company or anything. But there are some who are very much interested in not having the tower explored. And they may or may not even fully come into the picture in Wolfran's Fate. They may be kind of a sinister side force that works against the players. In fact, in part 2, some of their legacy is hanging out. So, should be interesting. The mystery of who killed Grayfon Nimblebrow, will be something that carries on. So, I think that about covers where we're at right now, as far as grand scope and grand design. Both groups wrapped up all three sessions. Grand total, we played for 9 hours. I think, if you take in a few breaks, it's probably more like 8.5. 8 to 8.5 hours was the entire playtime of that first thing for my groups. I suspect that if your group is super experienced with Pathfinder 2e, they would probably pretty easily shave a few hours off of that. We had some slowdowns that are perfectly expected, that come with kind of having new characters, new players at the table. Just folks figuring things out or trying to do things that are not exactly optimal and being like, oh, I'm going to try this. And it's like, all right. And that makes the combat take twice as long. But those things are kind of to be expected. So, but on the whole, pretty happy with how that worked out. I think in both cases, the players are interested and engaged. They're still kind of a little like, oh, this is just a fun dungeon romp. I don't think they've fully grasped, kind of because it hasn't been presented to them, how deep this story goes and where it's heading. But, honestly, this whole thing is just kind of one big piece setup. So, we're getting there. We're getting there. One part down, several more to go. What else is going on in the world of Eventide? Well, I've started building the GM's library. That stuff is starting to come together. It's a little slow here in the early going just because I got this adventure I'm trying to spin up, and this next part of the adventure I got to spin up. And I'm also working with artists, which gets me to the other thing we have going on. So I'm going to open things up for Q&A here in just a minute, so if folks have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. But first I want to talk a bit about where the art is going. So a little while back, I showed folks here, some of the bit work by, this is by William Hallett. And I contacted William because William reached out to me off a Twitter post I made earlier in the year about artists I was looking for this project. And I filed William's portfolio away along with a handful of other artists that came from that I as I was going through them, I was like, oh, that's really good. This kind of fits my vibe and fits my need. And William rose to the top because of his kind of amazing use of light in his pieces. He had a few pieces in his portfolio that really showed sunset and dusk, which is really an important concept to me and to Eventide, right? Eventide means that moment between day and night, right? It's more than just sunset. It's that specific little moment, the point where the tide turns from light to dark. So that was something I really wanted, and I commissioned a cover piece from him, and I'm not going to talk about that yet because I haven't even seen a sketch yet, but I'm super excited. The sketch is coming soon, and I am hoping to have something to show off for PaizoCon. And I also commissioned 3 other pieces. So I commissioned a Gloamling because I have no art of a Gloamling. They're brand new. I commissioned a piece of the Penumbrist because it's a new class, and I decided to make the Penumbrist an echo-touched human so that I could get the human heritage out there that I didn't have art for otherwise. And then the last thing I wanted was another Senisar elf. I have a Senisar elf from Lance Red, and it's an amazing piece. But that is a specific character that's designed to be a specific character. So I didn't want to use it as just kind of a generic elf piece because I want to kind of save it for its original use when I get around to doing that story. Which I still want to do. I just, it needs to wait until kind of I got a lot of the world building out of the way. So I also decided because that piece is a Senisar elf in fall, and Senisar elves, if you recall correctly, their aspect changes. Their look changes with the season. So in fall, they have kind of autumn colors. Their hair is auburn. They have go with oranges and browns and yellows. Whereas in winter, they're in pale blues and whites, and their hair is white. In spring, their hair takes on a bright, vibrant greenish hue. They have, they entwine budding flowers and wreaths into their clothing, and then in summer, they tend to be, kind of fiery reds and bright yellows and all the warmth of summer. So I wanted a Senisar elf in spring, and eventually I'll get one for all of the seasons. But this is what I decided. I've got a fall. Let me get a spring. I'll get a summer and a winter at some point in time here in the near future. But that's what I've got right now. So, over the past month and a half or so, I've been working with him. Looking at sketches, giving notes, and finally moving on to approvals. So, if you recall, we kind of showed off, myself off to the side here, a sketch of a Gloamling, right? This was the sketch. And from the sketch, I gave some notes that I didn't quite want the head to be so round. I wanted it to be a little bit water. I didn't want it to look so happy and friendly. I wanted to bring a bit of the creepiness back into it so that they were a little unsettling. And I wanted, them to be a little bit more lithe. There was a little bit too much musculature here. So that led to a color sketch, and this is still just a sketch that looked like this. And this got my full approval almost immediately. I had a few other small modifications about color choice and things like that. But, frankly, that was it. And from that, I was very happy with the direction it was taking. Well, I have the final now. And not only do I have that final, I also have the final with the Penumbrist and the Cenosaur Elf. So I have all three, and I haven't showed you the sketches for the others. And here today, I'm gonna show you all three. So I'm just gonna pop this up and let everybody take a nice good gander. So here they are. So yeah, taking a look at these two pieces, I am very excited about these. The Gloamling came out kind of just like I wanted. I'm very happy with the color tones there, and the equipment choices and things like that came together very nicely. The Cenosaur Elf is kind of perfect, a riot of kind of colors and vines and budding flowers. Really, really good work there. I'm very happy with that. Very happy with the color choices. And that Penumbrist is just about pitch perfect. Nice, pale. Kind of wicked looking, maybe not a good guy, maybe a villain, but not necessarily, right? Could be a fun hero. Yeah, so, you know, I love the shadowy cloak. I love the kind of fist of shadow magic, the long-bladed dagger. What's not to like? I am really quite happy with that. That Penumbrist is a snarler, by the way, and really all of that came together kind of fantastically. And honestly, folks, it's thanks to all of you. Your support here has made all of this possible. Art is really expensive. I can supply words all day long, but I can't do high quality art. I can do decent doodles and pretty good maps, but high end art I need a professional for. And frankly, it's expensive. So as one other little special thing here, and once I do this, then we'll hop over and okay. So I've been playing around with a little something else because I want to make a bit of an ad for the Penumbrist to get people pretty excited about it. So I've been playing around with a little thing here, and I don't know if the audio is going to come through. I always confuse it. So I'm going to go ahead and mute my background music here for just a second, and then I'm going to go ahead and play this. This is only about 10 seconds long, but it's me playing around, doing something fun here with the Penumbrist that I can share with folks. So this is still a work in progress, but I'm getting pretty happy. So here we go. Enjoy. So yeah, that's just me having fun with After Effects and being a bit zany and playing around with you know, some of the fun tools in After Effects and playing with the images in a way that allows me to do soft animation on them. So yeah, I'm not done yet. There's still a little bit of the animation that's a little chunky, but I'll get it there. I'll get it there. So oh good, I'm glad the music came through. So yeah, that's just me playing around with some fun stuff in After Effects. So yeah, so there we go. That's what we got. Good deal. I'm always a little unclear as to whether or not the sound's going to come through when I do an OBS. It's always a bit of a mystery. So that's fantastic. That's something I'm going to post up to the public here once I'm done with it. I'm not quite done. I think there's something about the animation that's still a little off and a little unsmooth, but I'm still learning how to properly rig figures and things, and I think I might need a bit more of an animation. So I don't know. But I'm having fun with it, and I kind of like the swirling on the cloak and stuff. So yeah, these pieces, I couldn't be happier with them. You know, these three really did turn out quite nicely. These are going to go in the player's guide. You know, one with the Penumbrist class, obviously. Gloamling will go in there, Cenosaur Elf. You know, so you know, trying to get some art in there. You know, for the size of the player's guide being about 64 pages. Honestly, I probably need an art budget closer to, like, frankly, I probably need about 10 grand to do all the art I need for it. I've already, the pieces I've already bought are $2 grand. So, you know, art's expensive. So I'm going to keep working on it, and we'll get it over time. The other day, I also reached out to another artist that I'm getting some art done for Wolfran's Fate in particular. So I want to get a nice piece of Wolfrin's Tower, and a fight happening in front of Wolfrin's Tower, and then I want to get some monsters and maybe a few items from it as well, such as the Signet Ring and maybe one or two other odds. So I am kind of excited to do work with this new artist. This new artist is out of the Philippines, and I believe they had an election there today. Boy, I hope that goes over well. And I am really excited to work with this new artist. They are super enthusiastic to work with me, so it should be a lot of fun. I got a question here. Does this project fall out of the scope of use with Pathfinder Infinite art packages? Yes, it does. I have to own these for this. Honestly, because when you put it up on Pathfinder Infinite, you technically, there's an ownership conflict that happens there, and I really want to own all of this myself. I've been working in the industry for a long time, and you know, frankly, everything I've ever created for RPGs, with the exception of the handful of things I've made for Minotaur games, I don't own. You know, I've derived plenty of pay and satisfaction from them and whatnot, but you know, I'm trying to build something that is something that I own and control, which is important to me as a creator. You know, you can spend a lifetime working in the RPG industry and never actually own anything. So Eventide is really something that I'm trying to build for myself. That is something that I control, that I can work with, that I have say over, and that ultimately, you know, is something that benefits me and, you know, my future and my creativity. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. I do like Pathfinder Infinite. I'm contemplating taking the Penumbra, stripping all of the IP out of it and turning it into just an occult spellcasting class and putting it up on Pathfinder Infinite. That's currently what I'm thinking, but I don't think I can put the Gloamling up there. The Gloamling has way too much world lore in it that I don't think I could import it in there without stripping it down to something weird and not really. Is there a Big Beard Brews franchise in Wormbone? Sure, yes. I'm going to assume that the mall exists somewhere in Eventide. It's probably in Zankar, to be honest. That's not a bad idea, actually. That might be a way for me to set that bit of lore and kind of ridiculousness into the world. That Zankar has like a monster fighting arena league. Question was, what was the most fun encounter in the module for either group from my end? From my end, well, in both cases, seeing the oven stomp at them and breathe fire and start swinging knives around, both groups kind of freaked. So that was fun. I think it was interesting because both groups had people who were really squicked out by centipedes. And no one intimated that to me beforehand, and it didn't cause a stoppage. I did check with them afterwards, like, listen, I can tone way down the description of them if this is going to be a problem. But they were like, it's fine. Yeah, in both cases, the centipedes ended up kind of squicking out the groups. The book fight and the food fight both seemed to kind of confuse the parties a bit. But yeah, I think it was the oven. The brooms and whatnot, but everybody was kind of charmed by that fight. Until the coat rack started hitting people, then they thought it was significantly less funny. Yeah, I think that's kind of where that. Yeah, Alara, yeah. I mean, there's no team here. I mean, that said, you know, over time, I would like to bring in some other folks to work on Eventide with me. Especially artists and editors and developers and stuff. I could use some folks giving me more backup, but frankly, until I have a bit more of a revenue stream, I just can't afford it. You know, I'm going to be looking to pay editors to give a pass at this stuff, but frankly, at 5 cents a word or so to do complete passes on this, I'm going to spend thousands of dollars just getting editing You know, so when you start baking that into the overall costs and you start figuring out, okay, well, how many copies of this am I going to need to sell on drive-through for me to break even? You know, it's not hard to start seeing a world in which that's not an insignificant number, right? You know, if I spend, you know, $5,000 on art and edit, you know, and I'm charging $20 for the thing, you know, there alone I have to sell 250, and that's assume I get every penny of it, and I don't, right? So it's more like I have to sell like 400 copies to break even. That's a lot. But you know, we'll see how it goes. Yeah, I've got plans, and you know, this all could lead to kind of a Kickstarter for a hardcover that's an instant print. That is like a, yeah, we're going to do a hardcover version of this that's going to come with, you know, the player's guide, the world guide, and the adventure all tucked into one book, or maybe in 3 separate books in a slipcase or something. And it's the Kickstarter is really just there to take orders, right? It's not even about creating it because it's already been created. It's just a matter of getting people who want it and ordering the right amount. So I ran 3 sessions. I got a question of how much, I said it was about 8 hours playtime, but with tangents and other things that happen, how long were each of my sessions? Each session was 3 hours long, and I ran 3 sessions with each group. So grand total, we played for 9 hours. I think there was about, you know, an hour. I'm pretty good with my groups about being like, hey, when we're here to play, we're here to play. We're not going to spend half an hour, you know, talking about this week's episode of Star Trek, right? You know, we're here to play. Let's focus on the game session. And by and large, they've been very good on that front, right? So we haven't had a lot of kind of distraction at the table. And each group, we take about a 5-minute break in the middle just because we're all playing over Zoom. And it's like, yeah, why don't everybody get up at the same time? Go stretch your legs, go, you know, use the bathroom, get a soda or something. So that's where we're at here, folks. Next week, join me back here next Tuesday, and we'll be going over kind of looking forward to the upcoming sessions. We'll go in detail about what I expect each to be, and I'm hoping by then I'll have a whole bunch more details about some stuff they can do in Wormbone and where that's going to go. So join me here next Tuesday for that. For those of you of the Lord level and higher, there will be a Secrets of Eventide stream this coming Saturday. It'll be at 3 p.m. I'm not 100% sure what it's going to be about just yet. I'm going to dig through my stuff and see what I've got and see what might be interesting to chat about. But that'll be this Saturday at 3 p.m. I'll be posting links about that to Patreon later on this week. All right, folks, that's all I got here today. I want to thank you all for coming. I will be hopping over to Twitch here in just a bit for those of you who hang out with me on Tuesday nights, playing some Wrath of the Righteous. I hope you'll tune in for that. Otherwise, folks, thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.